Come on. So, the best thing about camp, it's not just for students. They have a lot of things that they do for leaders, a lot of ways that leaders just get to watch students grow in so many different ways. It's a huge encouragement just for me to be able to be a part of these students' lives. And a little bit of the recap from camp is what we're going to be talking about today and my experience from camp, how God worked in me and showed me some more things. So this morning, we're going to be in James 1:22. We're going to start there, but we're going to be bouncing around a little bit. So get those thumbs ready. While y'all turn there, just to recap a little bit of some of the things that the speaker talked about. The theme this year was remember, as you can see on the shirt that I'm conveniently wearing, right? The theme was remember from the beginning of Joshua. Joshua leads the people across the Jordan, and then it's remembering where God brought them. See, in Joshua 4, he says to grab a certain number of stones. They place them at the banks of the Jordan. Again, conveniently looking something like this, if you guys can see. Some sort of memorial, remembrance type of thing, so they can remember the way God has brought them from point A to point B. You see, it's the same way God has worked in my life this week. He's helped me to remember a lot of things that he's done in my life. I can look back and I see the love that he's instilled in me for certain parts of ministry. Shortly after I came to know Christ, I was introduced through a college ministry called Cru about missions, evangelism, discipleship, and all kinds of things like that. And the love took off from there. It was that same love for reaching people that brought me from Tennessee to here, right? It's the exact same thing. God reminded me of that. Life gets busy. We can all agree on that, right? It gets crazy, it gets busy, and we lose sight of things. That's why God wanted them to build this memorial there. And that's the way God reminded me to just remember the ways that he's given me that love for missions. So James 1:22 says, "But be doers of the word, not hearers only, deceiving yourselves." James is telling us to be doers of the word. Put feet to faith, right? Don't just sit here and act like we're going to do it. If you want to be about it, right? Do something for it. He's calling us to take the gospel to all nations, which is going to bring us to point one. What are we supposed to do, right? If we're talking about a mission mindset, how are we supposed to reach those nations and take the gospel? Psalm 96, verse 3, if you guys look up on the screen, it says, "Declare his glory among the nations, his marvelous works among all the peoples." The reality is, this is going to look different for a lot of people. God is not calling everybody in this room to pick up and move across the globe. He's asking you to start right now where you're at. Sam last week talked about how it's not a coincidence that we are where we're at, right? So it's not a coincidence that your neighbors are your neighbors, that your coworkers are y'all's coworkers. There's no coincidence in that, right? So if we want to be a sending church, we got to start by being sent where we're at right now. But the reality is, some people are called to go. Some people are called to go across the country and plant a church. Some people are actually called to go across the globe. So we ask ourselves the question, how are we supposed to do that, right? Wherever we are being sent, here, there, or everywhere, how do we do that? We got three ways we can do that. The first one is 100% a made-up word, not a prayer, not the action of praying, a prayer. A prayer is somebody who prays, who commits to praying faithfully to an individual, for a group, a mission group, whatever that is. You faithfully commit to praying for those people. The second one is a sender. A sender is going to be somebody who can partake in missions just simply by giving that financial support, right? I've been saying recently, bills aren't free, right? You have to pay for things. And so anybody who can support financially those missions makes a huge difference in a lot of people's lives, more than you think. The last one, again, another made-up word, is a goer. A goer, somebody who goes. Somebody who's going to put their feet on the ground and be out there doing it. In all aspects, this is being a doer. Whether you're praying, whether you're sending, or whether you're going, you are being a doer of the word. The biggest similarity between all three of these as well is that it all takes a step of faith. It takes a step of faith to trust that somebody is out there that is needing your prayers. Trust that God is hearing your prayers to begin with. But it also takes faith to trust your finances, to God to support these missionaries who were out there doing their thing. But then, of course, it's a step of faith to be the one to step out and to go. So all of those in some shape, form, or fashion are going to be a step of faith. A lot of times we're going to ask ourselves the next question, what's the purpose, right? Why are we doing this to begin with? Why am I giving this money to missions? Why am I praying for these people? Why am I going? What's the point? That's going to bring us to point 3, and that every nation and tribe is going to be in heaven. Revelation 7, chapter 9 says, "After this I looked, and behold, a great multitude that no one could number, from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes with palm branches in their hands." This passage is going to give us a small glimpse, small little bit of binoculars into what heaven's going to look like. It's going to be every nation, every tribe, every language, everybody. In fact, it's going to look nothing like this room right now. It's going to be very opposite. The point of this is to point people to Jesus. We're going to see everybody of all nations and tribes worshiping. The point is to point these people to Jesus. But the bad news, we're not done. We're nowhere near done. Last year, I got a chance to go to DC. And one of the things that was there was the Museum of the Bible, pretty new thing that's been a part of DC, maybe about 5 or 6 years. You can do the self-guided tour. You can go through and look at all the stuff with the Museum of the Bible. But at the very end, there's this room, probably about as big as this stage right here. We got a picture of what it looks like as well. If you guys look, you can see some things are color-coded, color-coordinated, and there's a small percentage, maybe about 20% of this room, has translations of the Bible that are in the Old and the New Testament. They have both. It's about 20% of this room. Another quarter of this room was languages that only have the New Testament. They just have the New Testament. The Old Testament hasn't been translated yet into their language. The other half, you see all those empty shelves on the right side? Those are languages that don't have anything at all. Those are languages that either have only slowly been started and not finished, or haven't even been started at all. That's enough evidence that we can know the job's not done. If every nation, every tribe, every language are going to bow and say that Jesus is king, this is evidence we're not done. So whether you want to be a prayer, you want to be somebody who prays, you want to be a sender, or you want to be a goer, it's going to take that step of faith. There's going to be something that you have to do to step out and trust God. I got to see this firsthand at camp. This is one way that God just deeply encouraged me with taking steps of faith. We had one student who struggles deeply with severe anxiety. The first night, Monday night, we get into the worship session. There's tons of noises, lights, tons of people. This student was just rattled. He didn't want to stay in there. He stood outside. He didn't want to be a part of it at all. He didn't want to go in for the sermon or anything. I got to see slowly throughout the week this student progress more and trust more. He started going in for the sermons. He would go in for the games in the morning that can get a little crazy. And on the last night, Thursday night, he asked me, he's like, "Zach, can I go in for worship?" I was like, are you sure? Like, do you know how crazy this stuff gets? He was like, "Absolutely. I want to be a part of that worship session." And during the first worship session, he's hanging back, he's worshiping just in his seat. But the crazy thing about Zona, all the students are rushing the front. It's like a mosh pit down front, right? It's crazy, it's wild. Afterwards, after the sermon, he was down there in the front with every other person, holding his hands high, worshiping his little heart out. And I got to see just how much a little bit of faith can make a difference to step out. A Canadian missionary named Isabel Kuhn, who lived most of her life in China, she once said, "I believe that in each generation, God has called enough men and women to evangelize all the yet unreached tribes of the earth. It is not God who does not call, it is man who will not respond." So my question for y'all today is, what's your response? How are you going to respond to this call to be a doer of the word? Everybody's called to do something. What's your response? Maybe God's calling you to be a prayer, somebody who just faithfully prays. And maybe it's to be a sender, to trust your finances to mission groups. Or maybe God's calling you to go, right? God's calling people to go all the time. We just have to respond. Maybe you're here this morning and your call is to trust Jesus for the first time. Today will always be the best day to put your trust in Christ for the first time. Today is always the best day.